Welcome back to the Marianne Hickman Show, and I just want to prepare you for today's conversation. I met Amanda through a mutual connection, Ben Kerr, who was actually on the show a little while ago with his movie Standout. Incredible movie. Highly recommend it. And when Ben introduced me to Amanda, I have to be honest, I was just blown away at how much brilliance, talent, and light was crammed into the Kerr family. She's his sister, and just a sister from another mister as far as I'm concerned. She and I just feel so close to her through her vulnerability, through her story, and I want you to know her as well, which is why I wanted to bring her onto the show today. She has a story to share. Actually, she and her daughter Grace have a story to share. Now, in this story, this episode gets exceptionally vulnerable. We probably cried the entire time. I don't think there was a dry eye the entire time we were filming, because this story of grief, of loss, but also of beauty and survival and persistence and motherhood and daughterhood, and more than anything, the grace of God itself seeps through every word of this show today. And I could not be more thrilled to send this to you as mothers, as daughters, as children. Now, if you get the book that's in the comments, you're going to be able to read the entire story of what we referenced today. Here's the book right here. It's not for resale quite yet on this cover, but you'll be able to get it today. It's in the link. It actually is available on Amazon starting right now. And I want you to go get it because I want you to know the full story. I'll give you a small preview right now because we don't cover the details of the story in the episode itself. Grace Wilkinson, Gracelyn is her full name, had an accident at school that took several years of her life and eventually ended her life. Grace was given the gift of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel long before her graduation from this earth. And what she did both before the accident and who she became after is literally a gift to all of us. So if you have been dealing with grief, if you have been dealing with loss, or if you just, maybe you're like me and you have some experience with grief and some experience with loss, but maybe you just want to become a better mother, a more present human being. Maybe you just need a little more grace in your life. This episode is for you. I'll see you in there. I'm so glad that Ben introduced us.
Yes.
Ben is surrounded with and related to so many just incredible people. And when he introduced us and we got to chat about everything that we're going to talk about today, I was just like, oh, I know that it's amazing when I immediately go and tell all my kids about it. I'm like, you won't believe who I just met and all of this whole story and everything. And my son usually produces the show and he, stands in the producer's chair and makes sure the mics work good and everything. But I told him about this and I was like, I don't know if you'll want to be here today because this is really close to home for you. Mm-hmm. Because he goes to school where Grace went to school. He takes the same class that she took when all of this went down. And so he, combined with him being really sick, said, I think I want to wait and see what happens.
And I honor that. I honor that.
And I just want to say thank you for being here because this is still very raw and it's still very recent. And at the same time, you have learned and been put through an unsolicited PhD program in grief. Mm-hmm. And I know that there are people on the other side of this who need what you've learned, that they need to know that they're not alone in this, just like you did. Mm-hmm. So that's a long way of saying I'm glad that you're here.
I'm glad that I'm here too. And I'm always more than happy and I feel honored to hold space with people that are navigating this space because it is not linear, it's cyclical. And there's something about being with people and sharing space with people that without even describing, they know. Mm-hmm. And there's less wordsmithing, there's less platitudes thrown out, but what there is just more quiet empathy and understanding. And I am more than happy and honored to hold space for people that are on this journey because it's a significant part of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's become your life's mission in a way.
Mm.
along with the other vertical missions. You've done so much. I mean, your bio has so many beautiful things in it outside of this. But would you say that this mission to share grace with the world has become your core mission?
I would say that it's become part of it.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's a promise that I made to her. Grace had and has, and I say present tense because
Which
she
is so
continues.
beautiful. I love that.
She continues. And even just this weekend, you were speaking of my brother, who I believe that you've interviewed before. And we were in Red Rocks this weekend at a Louis Capaldi concert, and she showed off.
Did she really?
She showed off, and she showed up in big form. And very interesting that not many parents, and I know we're kind of jumping into this, but not many parents get to speak to their children before they transition from this world on how you will communicate once they're gone.
Yeah.
And Grace and I did.
And that was one of the things I wanted to get into. Maybe I'll just lead with this because as I read this book, we got to hear from both her and you.
Yes.
Simultaneously together. And you mentioned in the book that you spoke with her because of the time that you spent together. Most parents, as you said, don't get to spend that amount of
especially
time.
during those years, like from 14 to 20. Usually parents are competing for their kids' time then. And there were very, very few moments where we weren't together. And usually it's when her dad was with her, when I had to trade off to come home because I had other children
Right.
as well. And so, but I spent so much time with her. And also because of the intensity of the circumstances, the conversations that we had were unusual.
And that's what I wanted to dive into because when I put the book down, I finished it yesterday because I was like, I couldn't put it down. I walked out into the living room with the book, finished the last few pages, and I'm sitting there with most of my kids. One was at a banquet. And I'm looking around at my kids and first of all, grateful that I can look at all of them.
Yes.
I have 2 angel babies, but you know what that's like.
Yes.
But everyone's in the room. And I also felt this profound sense of lack isn't the right word, but how do you describe something that you don't have, that you wish you had? I thought to myself, what are the conversations that I need to have with these kids that I haven't yet? Because we've been so busy with the surface stuff, logistics and chores and doing amazing things, like their competitions and all the cool stuff. But there's deep, soulful questions that you and Grace got to have. I was hoping and begging in my mind for like a guidebook of things that you got to ask her. They're not on the wish list of things that you wish you had because you got to ask them.
Oh, yes.
What are the questions that we should be having with our kids, and what are the conversations that we should be having with our kids that you discovered?
Well, like you said, the questions that we got to have, while brutal, they were brutal and beautiful all at once.
I feel like she said that in every post that's in there.
That was probably one of the terms that we coined throughout her journey because it was so brutal. I've never seen human suffering like I saw in my daughter for so long. And because of the brutality, I think circumstances like this it's a magnifier of who you are. And it brings it to the surface. And I saw and I witnessed so much beauty. So you ask about the questions. I'll just give one example. And this happened throughout this time, but this is an example of a moment where questions became the conversation. And it's when her doctors told us that we'd come to the end.
And this was in January of 24?
It got brought up for the first time in January of 24. And then officially at the hospital, but we were just continuing to throw Hail Marys. We were just continuing to see if there was something that we could do. We were even contacting cutting edge researchers and teams across the country seeing, is anything ready to come out? Are there any new things ready to be released? Are there trials coming that if we could just keep her alive? I mean, this is the intensity that we were at. If we could keep her alive for 3 to 6 months, is there something that would change the game?
Oh, man.
And so we were not just we had exhausted all our resources, but we were even contacting our specialists, which were the best, not only in the state, but in the country. We're contacting
Or
research
worldwide.
teams.
You had
Yes.
been to Germany at this point.
Yes, we had been all over. She had had to the top surgeons, the top researchers, the top specialists around the globe. And we had fixed everything that could be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And it had been successful.
And when you say that, that encapsulates surgery after surgery and pain and revitalization of the nervous system. And like fix everything that can be fixed means sleepless nights and agonizing pain. And like that is so much encapsulated in that phrase.
Living at level 10 pain because her neurological system was fried. Well,
Literally.
Yes, like ultimately what took her is that all of the nerves were fried and left functionless in her body, and she lost the ability to keep down any fluid or water, including via IV. She developed an anaphylactic response to TPN.
What?
Yeah. So towards the end,
I didn't realize anaphylaxis was a part of it too. Like, are you kidding me?
So towards the end, she was only getting nutrition and fluids via IV, and then her body developed an anaphylactic response to TPN. So towards the end, we were working with doctors that were working with allergies, and we were doing like Xolair and things to see if we could change her response because she was already at the last option for nutrition.
Oh my gosh.
She'd already lost the ability to have nutrition even via a feeding tube.
I remember the post that she described. She took it out. That felt such a final
I
thing.
still can't read that post without weeping because no one knows how hard she fought for basic function, her bravery, and how the littlest things in life she's celebrated so much. And she was willing to do whatever it took if it meant extending her life. And I want to go back to what we were talking about when they told us we were towards the end after making all of these extensive is the understatement of the word, but extensive efforts to give her quality of life and to just keep her alive. And at this moment where the doctors were telling her father and I where we were at, and they asked us how we wanted to approach this. And my husband and I decided that we wanted to go and tell her privately, and that we didn't want this to come from a clinical team. And we walked in the room, and Grace, who is a gifted musician and vocalist and actress, who had previously been cast as the lead at Health Center Theater, we walked in the room, and before we could say anything, she goes, "Mom, I saw that Health Center is doing Little Women, and I want to audition next season." And she goes, "I want to fight so that I'm well enough for this audition," because there is a whole story, and you understand towards the end why Little Women is so important to us. And I always have called my girls my Little Women. And she goes, "Mom, I could be Beth."
Oh, come on. Oh, that just hits.
And my husband and I couldn't speak. And we said, "Grace, we need to talk with you." And at that moment, we mentioned that while she'd been sleeping that day that the doctors had come in, and that after meeting with not only all the teams at the hospital, but reaching out to all of our specialists around the world and all the researchers, and they just said, there is not only nothing more we can do, but because this is progressive, this will just be getting worse. And the most compassionate thing to do is to enter her into hospice. And when I told her that, she put her head down and she wept. And as a believer, my faith is central to my life and central to the work that I've done in global policy, in interfaith relations, in writing, in presenting. And in a moment where her father and I were just speechless, we were able to get out what we needed to say to her, and we just sat and wept with her. because we knew she had so many dreams still in her heart. And in a moment that came straight from heaven, because I did not have the capacity to think this, I said, Grace, you have given everything, and this is not the outcome that we were imagining or wanted. But there was no stone left unturned. Even in hindsight, I can't think of anything that was missed. If anything, we just went overboard so that she would know that she was worth fighting for. And I said, in a situation that we did not control, and an outcome that we did not choose, what could we do to help you feel like you are closing this chapter of your life and transitioning to ultimate healing on your terms? And it's an interesting question to ask a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
She was 19 at the time. She turned 20 on hospice. And she said, let me think about that. And over the next day or two, the list began. And that list, I have to admit that when I saw the list, it was holy and it was overwhelming.
I bet it was.
It was overwhelming because I was a mother, devastated, having already lost a little boy.
Well, not just that too, but I learned from the book that I have never heard of the circumstance that you went through in the process of an attempt to adopt, where the baby was also taken from you.
Yes.
Horrifically.
So we went through the process of adoption, and then those did not work out. And then I had also already had 2 late-term miscarriages in the second trimester, and those didn't work out. And so there were some different circumstances that so we were already well acquainted with grief. And then we had already lost a son right before his second birthday. So this was not a situation where I could not imagine what it was like to lose a child. I knew, but I never experienced this. So as I looked at this list, overwhelmed with my own grief and the reality of fighting so hard, I looked at this list, and it was so beautiful, because I think social media is made for situations like this, not because it doesn't feel vulnerable putting it out there, but we just said, my friends, this is the list that Grace wants to experience. I do not have the bandwidth to go about all these things. Who has connections for us? And pretty soon we had a luxury wedding dress boutique. She wanted to try on a wedding dress. She always imagined she'd get married and have a family. And so we were able to have a private fitting and have all the women in her life that she loves go and spend an afternoon with her. And we had a charcuterie board and sparkling cider and a photographer and a makeup artist. And she was a vision. And she found her wedding dress. And we recorded her music. And she had a goal to get 25,000 streams before she passed away, which we thought was really aggressive. And as you see in the book, there was almost, I don't remember the exact number, it was almost 600,000, or maybe it was over 600,000.
Yeah. It was around 500,000 or more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I need to go back and check how much it is now, because I have friends that say they'll put on their Sunday playlist now on Spotify or on all these things. And they said Grace's songs will just be coming up throughout the whole day.
Yeah.
So her music is now being heard around the world. She was able to hear
her voice
music.
is so beautiful, by the way.
And
oh my gosh,
and do you know what
it's so dynamic too.
Well, and this is the thing that is the amazing miracle. Gracelyn, about 6 months, 8 months into her journey, could no longer keep down food and vomited 12 to 20 times a day and had thousands of feeding tubes put down her throat because she would insert it on her own through her nose. This is when she could take a feeding tube. and then put it down her throat and have it go to her stomach. So the fact that she was able to maintain any vocal, because I'm a vocalist, I sang all through college. The worst thing that you could do is, number one, be dehydrated, which was a chronic issue for her because she couldn't keep down water. And number two, the acid of vomiting.
Oh, and not to mention the physical damage of shoving tubes through your,
No.
like,
And the fact that, and what you hear recorded is her on hospice. We had to keep doing retakes because she would start singing and then she would have to take a vomiting break. And then, so,
oh my gosh.
so the team that they went in knowing that she was not doing well or whatever, but I don't know if they understood the story. It's one of the best and most premier studios here in Utah. In fact, they record things for Disney and MGM and all these things. And pretty soon after listening to the recording and seeing the process and seeing her hooked up to tubes and a bag and everything, they turned to us and they said, do you want to tell us what's going on?
Oh, so they had no idea. They're like, this is strange.
They had no idea she was as sick as she was and how she got injured. And
did they know she was on hospice?
I think that they had heard that either she wasn't doing well or that she wanted to record her music while she could. I don't know what depth of information that they heard, but as they were splicing as she was taking breaks, they turned to my parents who were back in the recording room, Gracelyn's grandparents, and said, what's the story here? And they were speechless.
Wow.
They were speechless. And so when we talk about questions, and those were just two of the circumstances, and she made a list of all these things, even down to the fact that she always wanted me and her and her sister to have these permanent bracelets.
I saw those in the picture. I was like, I want to go get some with my daughters now.
And so, and she, I mean, this was what she had just in her casket, but I have one for each one of my girls, one for myself and one for each one of my girls. But she just made this specific list of things that she wanted to do, including gifts that she wanted to give others. And that took up so much of her time. And some of those gifts didn't show up until after she passed away.
Oh,
and we didn't know about them. And so it was such a stewardship, but such an honor and also such a responsibility to write this book, because sometimes you go into funerals, and especially if the people were kind of tricky, you hear a narrative that maybe doesn't sound at all like the person.
My sister calls it the glorification of the deceased.
Yes. And it's tricky. It's tricky because you want to celebrate that person for who they were. But sometimes, especially when sometimes those people were maybe porcupines or a little bit harder to love, or that they made some choices that made relationships hard, that can be tricky. And the most difficult part of writing this book for Grace is that I could never encapsulate how glorious she is, and everyone who knows her knows this. And so the responsibility became that no matter what I put in that book, it could never be complete.
It's not enough.
And yet there have been times, including this last weekend at Red Rocks, when I have turned upward and said, Grace, is it enough? Is it enough? And one of the other times I asked her that was the response you find in the last chapter, where she said, Mom, it's enough. And so I'm so grateful for the communication that we can continue to have with our loved ones. And I'm so grateful for the knowledge that I have, but that is ever growing for me, that those relationships not only don't end at death, but they can continue in dynamic ways, and they can grow stronger, and we can even continue to be a part of each other's lives. And before she passed away, in one of our last conversations, she knew I would always pray for her and I would always pray over her. And she said, Mom, when I move to heaven, can you still pray for me?
Oh.
Can you still pray for me? Because she'll still be learning and growing, and she'll still be having her own experiences. And so it's so interesting now to pray for my daughter, knowing she's free of pain, that she now has a body that can, well, a body. She now is free of the suffering that kept her in that cocoon as a butterfly. And yet I've asked her to help me understand and send me some messages of some of the adventures that she's going on, because I don't want to miss a minute.
Reading this book made me want to be a better mother.
Oh, thank you.
It really did. It revealed to me that there are things that I could be doing that I'm not. And it made me so grateful for the gifts of time that I have, for the gifts of the strength that my children have, for the problems that they're working up, or not working up, but working through. And it put in perspective. Gosh, we have been so blessed, and yet I think about the specificity of your prayers in this book. There's a moment in the book where you talk about, okay, angels, gather around. It's time for a board meeting. This is what we need. We need the right IV tube. We need it to fit. We need to meet the right person. We're not even at home. We're all the way far away. And it's like this shopping list, like an order picker from Amazon or something. It is so specific. And then you mentioned the next day how it all was delivered in even more specificity. And the way that you pray for your children was just, I mean, we pray for our kids. We do. And we pray about our marriage. And our son, he's 3, and he makes sure to even pray for our kids' friends. He's so beautiful. He's like, don't forget Ashby and don't forget Johan. And the specificity in prayer was one of the lessons that I took in this. And in my past, I think I have done too much of thy will be done.
Oh,
and not enough of, okay, let's work together on this.
Let's co-create these miracles.
Let's co-create these miracles, right? How did you get to this? Or what? How do we as mothers have the audacity, as I like to say, but it's not an audacity, it's a birthright to be so specific in our prayers?
Well, and that's an interesting question, because in the preface of the book, I said so many will view her story as a tragedy. And if you do, you are missing the message.
And that was so poignant. So poignant. Even the way you talk about her graduation.
Yes.
Her advancement, her life advancement. I don't think I ever found a spot where you called it her death.
Yeah. She wanted it to be her celebration of life. In fact, on her deathbed, and I mentioned it in there, she's like, we need to have pretzels. We need to have baked pretzels. And she goes, and we need to have lots of balloons, and we need to have henna artists. And I'm sitting there watching my daughter's life seep from her body. I'm taking care of her as her body is shutting down. And she's asking me to celebrate.
Yeah.
And while I know that Grace, because our family is well acquainted with grief, she knew that grief would come, and that is an honor to the depth of love that we share, not shared past tense, share. But I also have learned that the greatest way I can honor her life and that of her brother and the rest of my children is to honor the joy and the hope. And when you were talking about praying specifically and doing that, what I want people to know throughout the book, so many times we look at hope or miracles as an outcome. And so many times we were said, well, we know that based on how many people are praying for her, how many people are fasting for her, how many, all these efforts, that we know that Grace will be made whole. We know. And that happened in a different way than we wanted. But I think sometimes we miss so much of the dimension and the texture and the beauty and the fullness of what life's about when we think in order for it to be beautiful, it has to look one way or have one outcome. And I think that because of the specificity of our prayers and because the way we came together, and you can even see in the way that Gracelyn speaks throughout the book, how even when she was told it was the end, she was so grateful. because she'd seen God's hand, even if the outcome looked different. She'd seen God show up so many times when we needed a life flight, when we needed a bed, Cedar Sinai Hospital, when she needed to have a hole fixed in her spine. And then all of a sudden, within sending word out, we need these prayers, we need this and this and this and this and this. Then all of a sudden, everything aligned. And whenever I'm having a low day, when I'm feeling the acute ache of her absence, I let myself feel that, and I let it sweep over me like a wave, and I don't fight it. And I also like to turn my mind back to the ripples of God's awareness that I cannot deny. And those testify to me in my own life that even though I still have 2 headstones in the cemetery for Bennett and Grace, that God's goodness and his mercy, and ironically enough, his grace, will be enough to support me and sustain me through the word for whatever the road takes going forward.
How did you come up with her name? It's such a perfect name. It's God's grace personified in a way, you know?
I know. In fact, it was so interesting when we were at Red Rocks, and like song after song, I swear Louis Capaldi wrote put together the entire concert in honor of Grace. It was fun, but it started out the show. The second song was called Your Grace.
Stop.
Your Grace. And the whole thing. And then he wrote another one that was a song that when his mental health was not in a good space, he wrote a song. This is the song, like, I want you to listen to when I die. And it talks him addressing his mother and his father and his siblings. And anyways, the whole concert was just, my siblings and I were just there, and we just held each other. And we just wept because I went into this concert saying, I know this book's going to be released next week, Grace. I need to feel your nod.
Well,
I need to feel your nod. And it was uncanny. It was uncanny that we just sat there and we just thought, we hope all the other 10,000 people are enjoying our concert. We hope we all got something for it. But we just got a personal concert from our daughter that who would have actually been an amazing opener for him.
Yeah.
Because her music and the way that she writes is so similar to how he is. But anyways, it just, I really feel that through all of our different experiences in life that we have an opportunity to upgrade. Some people see it as destruction, and sometimes it feels like destruction. Feels like this big, huge crane or like cannonball is just really tearing everything down to the very foundation of what you have, even when it feels really holy and feels like it was serving a really beautiful purpose. And I think that we have the opportunity to decide what to do with that rubble and what to do in that space. And for me, I have decided that the very best way that I can honor these beautiful experiences and brutal experiences in my life is what I choose to take from all that. Take the things that were beautiful, take the things that can be saved, but then also look at what's a higher purpose that this can serve. And I'm hoping in this and the future content and body of work that I have coming forward, which will very much speak to people who have experienced profound loss and people that are looking and have the desire, that want to believe that goodness is still ahead. Maybe can't see it, maybe can't feel it, maybe don't even know how that's possible, but want to believe that maybe some of their best days are ahead. I want to be a voice to that, and not in syrupy, sweet platitudes that sometimes when you hear people speak, you're like, have you been there?
Yeah, that would make a great t-shirt, but that's about all.
like, does that bumper sticker, does it have any feeling behind it?
Or is it just parroted or regurgitated?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to speak. I always try and speak openly and honestly, but also with great hope and tools, and also great empathy in what this road can offer you, but also in what you can become through it. And for paying such a high tuition for these experiences, man, we better get an education and we better do something with it.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask is that what do you hope for people who read this book? What do you hope they walk away with? What do you hope will be better or changed in their lives and for them when they finish the last page?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question. I would say one of those things is I have found that hope is based on a relationship and not an outcome. For me, that relationship is with my heavenly parents and with my Savior. For someone else, it could be a higher power, the universe. But for me, I always saw hope as if I do this and this and this and this, then I have hope it will get better.
Yeah, almost like this qualifier.
Yes.
Right?
I have hope that I can turn in all of my points for this reimbursement for this miracle, right?
Yeah, I just was talking to my friend Heather about that, and she called it the like qualifying for miracles in a way, right?
Yes.
Why did this happen if I turned in all my points and I still got this?
And it's the transactional faith versus the transformational faith.
Oh, there's a beautiful distinction.
Right? That transactional is like, I did this, so now it's time to do this. And there's so much in my life where I did all the good things. I served in all the ways. I served in all these different positions and organizations and causes and all these things to hopefully relieve suffering around the world and to help people feel safe to worship God as in just according to the dictates of their own conscience. And then the 2 times in my life where I have had the most profound and heartfelt prayers, those outcomes ended up being very different. And yet, when I look back and I think, so how does the definition of hope, how's that different for me? And now it is, I don't love and honor God and follow him. And I don't believe because it's tidy, because it's easy, because it's formulaic. I do that simply based on my love and my devotion and my relationship. And that's a different vibe.
It totally feels like an act of gratitude and of love rather than the paying of a debt, which we could never pay. And that's the definition of grace itself.
Yes.
Grace is the love of God given to us, especially when we don't feel like we deserve it or have earned it or whatever it is.
And for me, it's been a submission because I am a goer and a doer, and I make things happen. And nothing can stop me. So for me, do I feel like God has sat around and planned all my heartaches? No, because that belief would be detrimental to my relationship with him. I do believe that for me, submission has been especially a challenge because you give me something and I'll make it happen.
Mm-hmm. You did over and over
You know?
and over and over again.
And so for me to say, God, after all I can do, after we've gone to such extensive efforts, I trust you. I may not agree with you. I may not be thrilled with it. We may be having some talks for a while.
Yep.
We're going to have some extensive talks, not only in this life, but the next, on why things had to roll out the way that they did. But in the end, man, if I can just focus on who I'm becoming. And Grace, it's so interesting when she was born, we tried different names and this name and this name. And in the hospital, I called her multiple names and nothing fit but Grace. And it's so interesting because if I were to summarize her entire life and all the experiences that I had with her in one word, it would be Grace. That after all I can do, I needed God and I needed his power in order to, and she needed it. And then also the way that she lived with grace and offered grace to others. And as you see throughout the book, so incredibly compassionate, even in her deepest suffering. The way that she got through it was to constantly look outwards.
I saw that over and over and over
many
again.
of the people she served didn't even know. Like in the book, when they told her it was towards the end, and her hospital room was filled with gifts and flowers. And I said, Grace, we're going to be going home and we're preparing for a hospice. And I said, do you want me to start taking carloads of things? Because it's going to take multiple carloads to get all these home. And she said, I'll take a few things. But she had a physical therapist there that she was very close with and that wept with us. And she heard what was going on. And she said, you work on all the floors. Who has not had any visitors? Who has been here a really long time that feels alone? And because this physical therapist not only knew Gracelyn's floor, but the other floors, she said, there's a man down the hall that's been here for weeks and no one has ever come to visit him. And at this point, Grace couldn't walk. And she said, can you put me in my wheelchair? And she filled her lap with a glorious bouquet of flowers that was meant for her. She went down the hallway and went into his room and gave him flowers to let him know he was loved and that he was known and seen. Not once did she mention why those flowers were sent.
Oh.
And not once did she mention that she was going home to die. Because to her, that didn't matter.
Truly.
But she wanted those flowers to serve even a higher purpose. She accepted them and was so grateful and acknowledged that. And she wanted that purpose to live on. And that is the legacy of Grace, and truly grace defined.
That is so symbolic to me, especially I was listening, as I do on Instagram from time to time, more often than I should, about a woman who received flowers from her husband. And she said, why do you get me flowers? They just sit on the counter for a couple of days and then they die.
Yes.
Right? And he said, because we need to remember that nothing is permanent, that there is an end, but we can enjoy it while we have it. And so for her to give those flowers, which probably are not alive right now, to him, to share the beauty of the present moment while it's there. And there's beauty in other moments, of course. But the way that she showed up, and when you gave me this book, you said you're going to know Grace by the time you're done. And boy, were you right. But you meant more than just knowing your daughter. You meant understanding Grace. And like I said, I want to be a better daughter because of this, a better friend because of knowing her and knowing Grace. And now I feel like there are tools embedded in this story that aren't called out as tools, and maybe that's deliberate. I don't know. But I feel like whenever I read it again, I'm going to pick up on another piece of an instruction manual, another piece of a way to become the blessing that somebody else needs in that moment. And just like she talked about, and you talked about her in the book, when she's handing out bracelets at school and people needed to talk, and it's not about, hold on, let me adjust my feed bag and all of this. That was not, it's not, she didn't hide it out of embarrassment at some point. It just didn't matter. It didn't matter. And at some point, what we're going through doesn't matter when there's a greater need. And it sounds weird to say greater need because she's literally, her life is on the line, but someone else has a need and she was placed in her path to administer the solution.
Well, and that was the amazing thing when we finally announced online that we were entering hospice and that the end was near. The massive waves of grief that swept across not only our community and state and country and around the world were immense, because all of this time, Gracelyn had been reaching out and serving others and texting people, and even from her hospital bed, sending gift packages. And when a mom was in the hospital with her daughter that was dying of cancer, sending her DoorDash. And so people's takeaway from that was, well, she must be doing okay. She must be doing better. And because Grace's focus was always on others and lifting and offering comfort, when they heard where we were at, it was astounding to so many people, because the way that she was showing up, they just had no idea that it was that terminal. And I think that is the legacy of Grace, and something that Gracelyn had to look at a far too young of an age as a teenager, and being faced with death and almost passing away, and even flatlining, and then bringing her back multiple times during that 6-year battle. She had to ask herself, what do I want my legacy to be? And that's not something that most teens even have to discuss.
I don't think I've even asked any of my kids that. And if I have, it's
right? Because time feels infinite, and it feels like you'll be here forever. And everything seems like it's going to be accessible and permanent, and not in a heavy way and not in a depressing way, but we all have 2 guarantees. We come into this world through birth, and then we leave through death. Those are the only 2 guarantees.
That and taxes.
Yeah. There's people that try to find ways to evade
That's
that.
true.
So, depends. But the question is, if those things are guaranteed, then how can we weave those in beautiful, meaningful ways that also, as mothers, as we bring our children, and as we act as birth doulas, we have birth doulas to come into this world that help us through that process. Well, I was privileged to be a death doula for my daughter.
Yeah, you called it a midwife, I think, in the book. And I
Midwifing.
thought, wow.
And
How beautiful.
I had the unique experience to bring her into this world. And when we found, which was different than my son, that she would be returning home, to say, how can we do this in a way that honors who she is and helps her go on her terms? Now, it was still brutal. There was no way for me to describe in there what that process was like. And
especially since, as you mentioned, you haven't done this before. You haven't been tutored on this before.
And her death was really difficult. They were not able to control her pain. And it was she was supposed to last a few weeks, and she lasted 5 months without nutrition and fluids. So it was brutal. And in that time, we were able to have conversations that are what life is about. We were able to talk without filters. We were able to discuss things as they are and things as they will be. And that level of discussion is one that continues to live on even after death. And we continue to communicate because we prepped for it, and we told each other how we would show up and how we would communicate. And we're still learning. We're only 1.5 years out. But it's amazing how, because we were able to prep for that. It's amazing how we've been able to show up and communicate with each other because there was a plan beforehand. And that is also a rare, and hopefully rare, I don't want any mother to lose their children, a rare opportunity, but something that has been such a gift and a blessing since we were able to discuss that beforehand.
That my husband and I have had discussions like that. God forbid something should happen, but I told him I promised I'd haunt him, and we've told each other, if God forbid something should happen, how will you know it? I'm talking to you.
Yes. Yes.
How will you know it's me? And how will you know, how will I get to you?
Yes.
You know? I have a question that borders, if not completely trespasses into the sacred, if you're willing.
Yes.
Does Grace have anything that she wants to share?
Let me tell you what she shared with me lately. She has taught me, and she's telling me, that life is as real, if not more so, after death than it was here. That death, in fact, opens your eyes, doesn't close them. She's told me that transformation just expands at death. And some of the things that kept us cocooned here, that we are set free and that our wings are able to expand and we're able to fly in ways we never even knew imaginable. And she's also told me that one of her greatest missions on the other side is what happens to people she loves here.
Mm-hmm.
And she's told me that she will play a role, a very significant role, in the healing of people that she loves so dearly. And I send her on errands often. And I feel like I don't know what to do, especially in the healing of her siblings. I ask her to intervene in ways that maybe are ways that I can't see or beyond my comprehension, or to address needs that only she can see. And it's interesting that without even her siblings knowing that I'm sending her on errands, they happen to make comments. They happen to say things, and I'm like, there you go.
Not surprised.
There you go. You showed up. And so I really pray that when people read this book, that they will able to feel the spirit of grace. And just like you said, not only in Grace Wilkinson, but in the meaning of grace in their own lives, and that they will be empowered to realize that even in situations that they didn't choose and that they didn't have control of, that they ultimately can make a decision who they want to become and the impact that they want to leave on the world, and that impact can even go beyond and supersede even the breaths that they take. And I think that will be the legacy of Grace.
I am in awe of her. I'm in awe of how her spirit is magnified somehow because of this, how more people might know her. And I think based on what I've learned of her, she wouldn't care that more people know her. She would care that more people know Grace.
Yeah.
And I just, as we wrap up, I want to extend an invitation to you, if you're listening to this, to go get this book. We're going to put the link in the comments so you can go get it. But I want you to go, if you're a mom, please go read this. If you're a daughter, please go read this. If you're a father, if you're a sibling, if you have any family at all, unless you're a test tube baby, and even then I don't judge. Plenty of those that are wonderful. I want you to read this book because I want you to experience what I experienced, understanding better the role that we have in each other's lives. Thank you for being here. Are there any parting words you want to share?
I just feel so honored to have been able to keep this promise to Grace. It's a promise I literally made in our last conversation before she passed away. And I told her that I would make sure that the world knew of her story. And I think this is just the beginning of things to come. And her music is heard all over. In the book, you will be able to see videos and get links to her music. You'll even be able to have access to the sheet music that she wrote. It's been arranged by a dear friend who's over One Voice Children's Choir. And I just feel so honored that, as overwhelming as it felt to be the one to tell her story, I would have much rather that Grace been able to do that. And that's why I weaved her words and her lyrics and her videos and her art in as much as I could, because I wanted you to see her, not just to hear my voice. But I feel so honored that this will be able to reach the masses. And my prayer is that going forth, that the people that read this book will see it's so much more than just a story. It's so much more than just a name on a page. Grace is beloved. She matters. And she made this world a better place. And my world better. And that we each can have that effect on our own spheres of influence. And that whatever situations that we are given, that we have the opportunity to make the best of them. And despite the outcome, the way that we forge those paths and the way that we walk with Grace can be our legacy.
Thank you for being the megaphone for her voice to continue.
It's an honor.
Thank you for introducing her to me and our family.
Thank you for listening.
We're going to put all the links in the show notes. So if you want to listen to her music, if you want to download the sheet music, if you want to go get this book, everything is in the show notes. So if you're listening in the car, when you get where you're going, go back to the show notes, click on it, go download it. It's available for you. If you're in the sauna, go click on it right now. Maybe listen to her music right as you close out, but you better bring tissues because I promise there will be waterworks. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being who you are. And thank you for the good that you're doing in the world. And thank you for the people that you're blessing that you don't even know. And thank you for sharing this with people in your life. Thank you for helping us spread this message. And thank you for being who you are. I'll see you in the next episode.